Hello, everyone. Dr. Victoria Skirbo here, speaking to you from the Seeds of Transformation Healing Center in Wareham, Massachusetts. Today, we're going to be looking at the last week of April 2022 from an astrological perspective. This is part of my monthly astrology and Kabbalah of the month. In this case, it's April 2022. You can check out the Kabbalah portion. I did that at the beginning of the month. If you want to go over that. So let's take a look at what's coming up for the next week. Now today, as I sit here, it is the 24th of April, and it's a Sunday, and we're actually going to start on that. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, just give me a moment. Forgot to change something, so I'm changing it now. Oh dear. Okay, here we go. Here, oops. Sorry, guys. Okay. So we're looking at the astrology of April, and we're going to be looking at week five. So let's continue here. Here we go, week 5. So today is the 24th. Now, when you add April 24th, 2022, we get a 34/7 vibration. The interesting thing about the 34/7 vibration is that it is a vibration associated with the Sephiroth Hod. Hod is the Sephiroth associated with Mercury. And we have a day that vibrates to that vibration. And what's being activated today is Mercury. Now, two things are happening with Mercury. First thing that happens is we have a first quarter square to Saturn. This is a crisis in action. This was seeded, this Mercury-Saturn cycle or synodic cycle, which is a year-long cycle, was seeded back on March 2nd. And it occurred at 19 degrees of Aquarius. At the time, we did talk about this, but just as a review, 19 degrees of Aquarius, the Sabian symbol for that is a forest fire is being subdued by the use of water, chemicals, and sheer muscular energy. The keynote is the skill and courage necessary to bring under control the destructive potential of carelessness, of karmic visitations. And the first quarter square is one in which we feel the need to take an action. We need to take an action. And Mercury and Saturn, to a certain extent, is about delineating the lines, right? Delineating the boundaries. You know, when you draw a line and say this is the line that you cannot cross or that you must cross, or so we're at a stage in the cycle between Saturn and Mercury in which an action needs to be taken that will support what is seated at that conjunction. So the action that was seated at that, the action needed to be taken revolves around subduing this force. Really, in this case, it's a forest fire, which is a force of nature, but it can be anything where it is explosive and destructive. And that occurred on the 2nd of March, which was only a week. It was a week after Russia invaded the Ukraine. So we could see that connected to that, right? At the same time, on the same day, we have, well, not at the same time, shortly thereafter, I should say, on the same day, we have Mercury making a waxing sextile to Neptune. This is about opening the lines of communication. The question is this about forgiveness, understanding, seeing the delusion, the lying, seeking out the truth here? And we can see here in the chart, let's look at the two aspects. Now, this chart is the chart for Mercury square Saturn. And we can see we have Mercury right here at 23 degrees of Taurus. Incidentally, Mercury had just made its conjunction to the north node of the moon. And that Mercury conjunct the north node of the moon brings our attention and our mind power to a certain extent to how are we going to move forward in the world? How are we going to evolve? What do we need to do? And when we're dealing with Taurus, those things need to be practical. Now, it's interesting because the North Node in Taurus, Taurus does rule money. And so there seems to be, as part of the plan, I should say, to stop Vladimir Putin from his illegal humanitarian disaster, genocidal war on his neighbor, the Ukraine, right? That they use money as a weapon here, right? They use money as a weapon. You can't do this, you can't do that. And I just heard, I think it was yesterday, and I don't know if it was a bill that was passed or it was just a bill that they were going to put up, and it was to take the money that and the resources that they had gotten from the oligarchs, the Russian oligarchs, and put that in a fund to rebuild the Ukraine, which of course is a great idea, unless they somehow get the money back by being the people who rebuild the Ukraine. So that's another story for another day, which we're not going to talk about. But so these things are, so there are things that are being put forth to put those lines in the sand, to try to stop, I think, what's going on. And at the same time, we have Mercury making that sextile to Neptune here. And so sextiles are mentally stimulating. In this case, it is a Gemini side sextile. It's a 60-degree sextile. So we're talking about opening the lines of communication. When you're dealing with Mercury and Neptune, those lines of communication can be both lines of communication where we can say, okay, here's a line, let's do a truce so that we can get aid into the people that need it. It could work like that, right? It could also give us the increased capacity. It's a capacity which we already have, but when the stars are aligned, things flow easier. And that would be communication with spirit and bringing the energy of spirit into the situation, asking spirit to give us solutions and directions that we can go in to actually stop. Now, if we really truly just wanted to stop things, we could, but we would all kind of have to agree on it. The problem, of course, is that not everybody's getting the same information. And it could be even questioned, are we really getting all the information? Are we getting the valid information? Nobody has the wherewithal and bewithal to be saying the absolute truth of a situation, because everybody's truth is from a perspective. But there is an overriding energy here of trying to bring to an end some sort of forceful engagement that must be stopped. Okay, just in the symbols themselves. I mean, you wouldn't have to necessarily connect these things with the Ukraine, although you certainly can, and you can apply this to your own life. Where in your own life do you need to put a line in the sand? Where in your own life do you need to take an action to create the structures, the mental structures, Mercury and Saturn, that will help you sustain yourself through this crisis? These are the things, so you can apply this to your own life. It's just very interesting that we have the symbol of the forest fire, which I find, I'm always astounded by how apt many of these symbols are in the situations we find ourselves when these degrees of the zodiac get stimulated. Incidentally, this is the card associated with the 34/7. So we know that what's happening is we're getting loads and loads of information. In fact, the sextile between Mercury and Neptune can be that. It can be, Neptune is kind of a hidden energy. It's kind of it's foggy. We don't usually see things clearly, but when it makes that sextile to Neptune, perhaps the fog clears, or the fog of war, or the fog of anything, and we can see a little bit more clearly, or a lot more clearly. I would like to think anyway. Okay. On Wednesday, the 27th, we have Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. This is another 60-degree Gemini side sextile where we're opening the lines of communication. The interesting thing about Mercury and Jupiter, those are the two planets that rule our mind, our right brain in the case of Jupiter, our left brain in the case of Mercury. When they are interacting in these opportunistic sextiles or in trines or even in conjunctions, it's like both sides of your mind is in the same place. It's on the same page. So this is an opportunity for us to utilize both our mental capacities and our intuitions to problem solve and to talk to people and to talk about things and honestly put it out in the open. It's very difficult because of the amount of I don't even know what to call it in the political sphere. But we utilize this energy. It doesn't have to be political, right? We can see the need for it in the political sphere, but we're in our life, like the outer reflects the inner. So what we're seeing in the outer world is on some level something that was within us that we're trying to come to terms with. And this kind of sextile will help us to not only maybe understand what we're thinking, but also understand what other people are thinking if we are open to it. Now, on the same day, we have Venus conjunct Neptune at 25 degrees of Pisces. Now, Venus and Neptune have a special relationship because Neptune is considered the higher octave of Venus. In fact, Venus is exalted in the Neptune ruled sign of Pisces. Okay, so 25 degrees of Pisces, where this synodic cycle begins, and this is a year-long synodic cycle. So this is planting a seed of love and compassion because we're dealing with Venus and Neptune, of values, of connection to source, Venus and Neptune, our relationships to each other, our relationships to the divine, our relationship to ourself, and our personal, very self-aligned relationship with the divine. 25 degrees of Pisces, a religious organization succeeds in overcoming the corrupting influence of perverted practices and materialized ideals. The power of the soul to intervene in the personal life and to induce necessary catharsis. The key word here is purification. It's interesting because the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church has been pretty active at this time. Sometimes you hear about stuff and then it quiets down and you hear about stuff. But there's been a lot of bringing up a lot of the sexual issues. A lot of that stuff is coming around. A lot of legal stuff is coming through because of that. And so the kinds of things that happens with the sexual abuse cases in not just the Catholic Church, but because the Pope, we're talking about the Pope here, but in all sorts of different churches, different organizations, all of that stuff with this abuse of power, especially the sexual abuse of children, the sexual abuse of gymnasts, the sexual abuse of wrestlers. I mean, it's just, it's really sort of beyond the pale in a way. And yet the theme that runs through all of that is an abuse of power by people who have, where there's an uneven, where you're dealing with the powerful who don't have to answer to anybody, and the disempowered that are the victims of those powerful. And that theme just keeps coming up and up, whether it's the war in the Ukraine, whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's the Olympic Committee, or whether it's universities. It's all but it all points to that power over dynamic, which is the more masculine, aggressive energy, right? Of, you're going to do it because I'm making you do it, as opposed to you're doing it because you want to do it, or because it's going to help you, or it's going to help others. You know what I mean? It's like that more feminine sort of back and forth. What is, let's talk about it, let's discuss it, let's do that. No, you've got to do it like that. It's that it's the energy of the authoritarian father, really. Whether it's father or president or God or priest or bishop or whatever, right? So we see that, and we can't, what we're seeing going on in the Ukraine, or even in Yemen, or anywhere else, or Syria, is the powerful crushing the powerless. And that is patriarchal. That is patriarchal. So we can see all of that coming up, so that we can see it and we can decide, put that line in the sand. Are we going to take this anymore? What are we going to do about this? Now that we see it, what are we going to do about it? On Thursday, April 28th, we have Mercury make a trine to Pluto. Now, this is a creative, self-expressive trine. When we're dealing with Pluto, we're dealing with the soul. In the case of Pluto in Capricorn right now, it's the world soul. So what is the world soul creatively self-expressing? I went and looked at Astrology King, what he says about this particular aspect. And he writes that Mercury trine Pluto transit is ideal for asking for favors and talking people into things. So this can be a very, very persuasive energy. Pluto can be a little underhanded, or Pluto certainly is a desirous energy, and Mercury is communication, right? Your brain is very powerful under this influence, and it gives you the power of penetration at the mental level. This could be applied to sales work, debating, bargaining, or negotiating favorable deals. It's very possible, and I just pray that this is true, that we could maybe have some sort of truce, some sort of stopping of the action in the Ukraine, so that we have an opportunity to try to negotiate something. We'll see what happens with that. On Friday the 29th, we have Pluto stationing retrograde at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Now, Pluto is almost out of Capricorn, and if it had just gone maybe 2 more degrees, it would have been in Aquarius, but that doesn't actually happen till next year. It goes into Aquarius for a little while, backs into Capricorn, and then in 2024, I think it goes into Aquarius, where it will stay. I believe it's in Aquarius for 20 years, but I may be wrong, maybe 19 years. It's a long time. Pluto is in Aquarius for a long time, but it finally moves out of Capricorn. And it's been in there since 2008. And we have seen the dramatic transformation of the structures of our governments, our large institutions, all of that is Capricorn. We're not quite done yet. We're not quite done yet with that. So Pluto station stops right before, right at the end, right? And it's going to back up, right? So whenever the transpersonal planets are the planets outside the orbit of Saturn, that's Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. When they change direction, because they're so far out in the out in the solar system, it looks like it's standing still for a long time before it actually changes direction. It takes about 7 days for those outer planets to turn around. So they're sort of standing still, And so when these planets, the energy of them are sort of like sitting there, it potentiates and potentiates and potentiates. And very often when there is a shift in the in those outer planets, from direct to retrograde, or retrograde to direct, either way, there can be some sort of large thing that happens on the planet. It's a large, evolutionarily transformational energy that is expressed, and that can expressed in things like explosions or volcanoes, or just really sort of profound incidences that sort of change everything, change the whole direction, right? So this is happening at 29 degrees of Capricorn. It says a woman reading tea leaves, the ability to see the signature of hidden meaning in the every occurrence drawing one's attention. So whether it's tarot cards or tea leaves or looking at the stars, there is an ability to see patterns. This is about pattern recognition. When you do astrology, you're doing pattern recognition. When you're a doctor and you're looking at a constellation of symptoms, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take all those symptoms and connect it to a common cause. So it's sort of seeing that how everything is connected. And this practice is based on the realization that the relation of everything to everything else. So, and I'll give you an example. For a week or two, just on the edge of my property. We have about an acre here, just on the edge of my property, in my neighbor's yard. There was a tree that it was more than a murder of crows. It was a group of crows. Murder is supposed to be 13, but it's also murder of crows is like just a lot of crows. Would sit in this tree, and they would caw and they would caw and they would caw. Now oftentimes there are ravens in trees, and they're like community trees. It's kind of like the hangout spot. It's like the bar on the corner for the ravens, right? It's usually the same tree all the time, but this was kind of unusual because I had never seen so many ravens just sort of sitting in that place. And it happened about 3 or 4 times, which, it three's a charm, right? And then the day that Russia invaded the Ukraine, as soon as I walked out the door, a whole murder of crows went right over the house, over my head, and out towards the north, which was the direction where northwest, I think, right? So that was the direction they were going, in the northwest. So I saw all those crows, and I knew that crows, transformational, maybe difficult, some sort of warning was happening. And I'm like, gee, that's interesting. And then I heard about the Ukraine. So I used crows as a way to determine the energies that are. You could do that with anything. That's what you do with tarot cards. You can actually program them. Your relationship. You could read a book on tarot, or you could look at a card and say, what does this say to me? And so when you put all the cards out and you have the meanings of what those cards mean to you, you can connect the dots and make a story. Okay. And the key word here is clairvoyance. On the same day, we have Mercury ingress into Gemini. And Mercury will, on the 10th of next month, go retrograde in Gemini. So Mercury is actually at this point, actually since last week, I think, has been in its pre-shadow. So you may be feeling that things aren't working out, details, schedules are starting to get loggy. That's the Mercury retrograde. And so Mercury retrograde will be retrograde in Gemini. It moves into the last degrees of Taurus, and then when it changes direction, it has to go through all of that again. So Mercury in Gemini as going retrograde in the sign that it rules, is really going to be a lot of conversation. A lot of that conversation is going to go nowhere, but a lot of that conversation is going to go somewhere. And you really have to double check your details and your data with this. Very important with that Mercury. Well, Mercury in Gemini is the facts man. So we may get a whole bunch of facts right as soon as Mercury moves into Gemini. And then once it goes retrograde, we may have to review a lot of that stuff. But we'll see what happens as we come. There's just so much going on, right? So here we have Mercury's ingress into Gemini. Here's Mercury in Gemini. And this is Pluto's station. Pluto stationing here. Now I want to point something out about Pluto's station. Pluto's station, this potentiates that Pluto energy, right? The Pluto is trine Mercury, right? Very, very powerful persuasion here. It is trine the North Node. It is sextile the South Node. It is sextile Jupiter and Venus and Neptune. So all of this healing capacity, along with this flow to the North Node and Mercury, we really do have an opportunity to make some big progress. The thing is that we need to not listen to what other people are saying about it, but focusing on what we want to see in it. Because what people are saying about it, even though they may be experts, is based on the past and based on what they know up to this point. We have to not just look at the past. We have to be able to be in the present moment and connect with spirit, so that spirit can work through us, and things can be resolved and things can be solved. Now, this is, I mean, you probably have this sense that what I'm saying so far has been, whoa, this is a pretty big week. Well, yes, and the period at the end of the sentence occurs on Saturday, when two things are happening. The first thing that's happening is we have a new moon solar eclipse at 11 degrees of Taurus. Sabian symbol for this is a woman watering flowers in her garden. This degree was activated the beginning of last year. I believe it was might have been Uranus and Venus, or it might have been Uranus and the sun, but it was one of the Uranus synodic cycles, actually a couple of them, that occurred at this 11th degree. And so this is the development of the powers of the mind on which ego consciousness is based. And the key word here is cultivation. So my question to you, as it was last year when this symbol came up, was how does your garden grow? What are you watering? What are you nurturing? What seeds are you nurturing? This 40/4 vibration is located in Malkuth on the tree of life. Malkuth is the root. It's the kingdom. It's the Sephiroth on the tree of life associated with the physical world. 4 is about building, and 0 is the God force. This is about building heaven on earth. But 4 is crisis. So there's crisis in this. So part of what will be happening through the solar eclipse, and eclipses are generally associated with crisis because eclipses bring change and opportunities to evolve. And this is a North Node eclipse. This is occurring at the North Node. So it's about moving into the unknown future. This is about having faith, taking that leap of faith, really. This is Saros series 6 North, if you go by Bernadette Brady's numeration, or Saros cycle series, Saros series, it's not easy to say, by the way, 119. It says this family of eclipses is concerned with the individual's relationship to father figures, authority figures, or the need to take responsibility and control. It is time for the people to stand up and say, enough shenanigans, enough. We do not want to be abused. We do not want to see other people being abused. We want to live in a world that's livable, sustainable, gentle, loving, doable. And we're from at least what it looks like from the outside, that is not the world we're living in. But you can find that world within you. And if you focus on that world within you and you focus on those things that you want to bring into the world, peace, harmony, whatever it is, right? Creativity. That is an inside job. And unless you develop it in your own imagination, you won't be able to build it. And really that's what this 40/4 talks about on a certain level, is what do you imagine the world to look like? So so we have the power to do that. We have the power to do that. We've always had the power, but we've been isolated, I think. And one of the things that anytime there's a new media, whether it be the book, right? Writing, the printing press, then it's radio, then it's television, movies, right? Now it's internet. So with the internet, is like anybody who's got an internet connection can get on the internet and put out their opinion and put out their ideas and put out. So there are things that it can be manipulated. That's true, but there are things that are available to people that weren't available before. They weren't aware that certain things were happening. We can use that to our benefit. We can use it. We can easily get overwhelmed by it, right? Remember this card, all that stuff coming in, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, but we also have more awareness, and with more awareness comes more responsibility. And on the same day, the last thing that happens is Venus conjuncts Jupiter at 28 degrees of Pisces. I want to point out a couple of very important things about this. First of all, Venus is exalted in Pisces. Jupiter is the classical ruler of Pisces. So these two planets coming together, known as the lesser Venus and greater Jupiter, benefics, the things that bring goodness to us, in the sign of the divine, our connection to source, our imaginations, the possibilities, the creative possibilities. On a day that vibrates to a 40/4, which is a Pisces vibration, which alludes to building a foundation to bring heaven to earth. We have the Sabian symbol at 28 degrees of Pisces. A fertile garden under a full moon reveals a variety of full-grown vegetables, the full satisfaction of the individual's basic needs, the keyword abundance. There is enough for everyone on this planet. It may not seem that way. There is. What we need to learn to do, however, is cooperate not just with each other, but with the planet itself. This is the rising of the feminine. If we look here, we can see Venus and Jupiter making that conjunction. Neptune is there, so that's included, that's in there. So we have Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, Venus, the planet exalted in Pisces. This is very powerful. At the same time, Pluto trining Mercury. Mercury at this point is in Gemini, but it's still trining Pluto, trining the North Node. And incidentally, something I didn't point out, which I think I will, which I very much need to, is that this new moon is conjunct Uranus. Uranus is about breaking free, breaking out of the constraints of Saturn. Saturn is square the nodes. Saturn is square the nodes. Saturn is square Mercury, right? The resolution node for this is the south node. Reviewing the past in order to move into the future and decide to do it a different way. A line in the sand. We are not going to do it this way anymore. We have the power, folks. We just have to have your voice heard in whatever way you can. And in some places it's easier than others, but we certainly have a voice, so the voice can be used. Okay, let me stop the share. All right, guys. So I hope you find this helpful, a little inspiring, a little positive. We do have the ability to change things. We could do it like this. It comes with awareness. And why not? Why not? Okay, guys. Have a wonderful rest of April. Keep your eyes peeled for at my moon shadows with Ona, which I think we're going to do Friday, but I'm not sure. So I have to talk to Ona. I can't announce it without talking to her. But we're going to be doing moon shadows with the new moon in Taurus. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then, of course, the astrology and Kabbalah for May that's coming up, and the taroscopes for May. All right, guys. Much love, everyone. Namaste. I love you all. Take care.